Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part 2, joining me today is...
A geek for fun.
And Steve.
For Baxi. Today we're here to do a big one. This is a big review. We're going to talk about The Killing Joke, the 1980s Batman comic book that's kind of a staple of the continuity. Written by Alan Moore with art by Brian Boland, and I'm curious, did everyone in here read the same version? Did we all read the version with Boland's colors or no?
I read the one with Higgins' colors, but I have read the one with Boland's colors. I've gone back and forth multiple times at this point.
Gotcha,
yeah,
Alfie?
The trade I owned is the one with Boland's colors. But after reading that, I went up and just looked up the Higgins colors just to have the comparison and compare and contrast for the sake of the review.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I read Boland's colors too, because that's just I bought the anniversary edition whenever that was released. And I don't know, it's weird. I like Boland's colors a lot. I think it's good. But I have an emotional attachment to the original colors, I think. So I don't know. I'm not sure how much I want to really talk about that, but it's an interesting little thing that we've got a remaster of it, because Boland always wanted to do the colors, but he knew he wouldn't have time. Yada yada yada.
The only thing about that I do want to just say before we get into the heaviness that this episode will require with the subject matter, because Alan Moore can't just fucking write a happy comic, is the only thing that's ever annoyed me, and why I always think the original colours will be superior, is because the fucking bat logo is clearly meant to be drawn with the oval over it, but they just make it grey and it's not big enough, so it looks stupid, so they should keep the oval at the fucking very least.
No, I prefer the Higgins colors. I grew up on the Ballin retrains, but having read both of them and going through the original and listening to them talk about it, it's really, really clear that whatever Ballin's intentions were when he originally wanted to color it are not where his sensibilities were when he did the actual recolor. And so what he was doing with the recolor versus what that book clearly should be colored as are two very distinct things. And I think the Higgins ones are just better. They get the material more than the Ballin version does.
I just like the original colors because they have this they just have this particular nightmare quality to them, and I think it heightens the art quite a bit.
Yeah, I think it contrasts a lot better. It's not quite as flat as the Ballin ones kind of turn out to be.
Yeah, there are things I like more, in particular scenes, the big Joker speech, that he gives to Batman in this, because you got to narrow it down because there's so many Joker speeches, but the big one that he gives to Batman in this, I don't like that in the original color, Joker's suit is red and green in different panels and stuff. I like in the Boland that it stays purple the whole time. But then there's just other things that it's just so trippy that it works to have that constant carnival color shifting thing going for it. So
yeah, I think for the era, and we can move off of this, but I just wanted to say real quick, I think for the era, for a 1988 comic, Higgins does lighting super, super well. The flashback scenes are not in black and white. They're dark, but some of the backgrounds will be a lot more vibrant than the Joker will be in the front panels. There'll be backlights and stuff on them. For when it came out, that looks really, really good, and I feel like it almost loses a step in like how well colored that was for the 80s, when Bala just kind of turns it into his more flat design. Not that it's a bad flatness, it's just like it's a very sort of like, this is a typical digital colored book versus there was some kind of artistic statement being made with the colors in the Higgins one.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where, like, it's kind of hard because it's weird to me that Bolin didn't get to color it originally. Because, I mean, it is, like, it's long for the 80s, but it's not that long. Like, we were doing stuff longer than this by this point. In comics, and like the whole thing was DC went to Boland and said, okay, we're giving you like a prestige thing, you pick who you want to work with on it. And it, like, just when they outlined so much of that for him, you think they would have been like, well, I guess if you want to color it, we can extend it another couple months, you know? Like, it always shocks me that it was a time constraint seemingly for the coloring, you know? Anyway, so that's probably not the thing that everyone wanted us to talk about at the beginning of the episode. But I had a good time talking about it.
Exactly. It's the most wholesome, peaceful, I'm sure the rest of the podcast will change tone.
Yeah.
Talk about the coloring. I think that's the most important aspect of this review, and we could just call it right there. 5 out of 5.
Yep.
John Higgins colors with the win.
Yeah, there we go.
Is that where the term fridging came from? Because now the cooler colors look like it was in a freezer. Is that what
sure.
that means?
Sure,
Yeah,
that's what it means.
Cool.
I, the representative of women's history on this podcast, can confirm. Yeah, I don't know. The Killing Joke is one of those books to me that's like very, very influential and very, very important to me as a comic fan, particularly as a fan of the Joker. I do think it is still like the seminal work on the Joker. It's, of course, hilarious to say that given my general disdain for Alan Moore as a writer. Actually, let me rephrase that. Alan Moore as a person. Alan Moore is a fantastic writer. Alan Moore is an annoying person. And so it's a very, very, like, honestly a very prestigious book in that regard in the community and just in comics in general. But over recent years, it's definitely drawn some more spotlight, some looking back upon it and stuff. And it's made it a harder book to talk about and a harder book to like. You kind of have to like it with an asterisk now. But that being said, upon this reread, I still felt very emotional about it. I still like really deeply connected with it. And I still think it is a great Joker story and still maybe the greatest Joker story. It's just, now it's got a big old Alan Moore shaped asterisk next to it. So yeah, there's that.
I think as well it's something where very similar to you, I imagine, Ian. It's one of those first books where like you're getting into Batman. That is like the house that is short, and as a result of that, it's often cheaper. And it's normally something you buy when you're going for those initial things like your Long Halloween, your Dark Knight Returns, year ones. It's in that like pile of.
It's the stack that they give to the Batman directors. Exactly
right. They get that and they don't read anything else unless your name's Matt Reeves. Bless you. But like, so it's that like informative thing, and for me as well. Like as younger, I really really enjoyed it. I fucking. Brian Boland is one of the best comic book artists of all time for me. Like, I love how he draws the Batman world. Like, he's one of my gotta be like top 10 Batman artists. Like, just because he's my favorite Joker artist of all time. Like, how Brian Boland draws the Joker is perfect. Like, that is the character 100% to a T. That is the best that character's ever looked. obviously you can do the Joker as a character that should have multiple designs. It shouldn't just be one, but if I'm going to pick like a preference, it's that, and I love how they do the world. And I think that art style lends itself to how Alan Moore writes, because Alan Moore writes very dense scripts. Alan Moore will hack a script. People make the joke that reading Alan Moore's script is like reading basically a novel, because he puts so much detail into the scene descriptions and everything. And that's something with on this read I really made sure to pay attention to, because that is one of the things that Bolan as an artist can bring to life, of like what is reflected in the puddles and the Batmobile scene, who is in the Arkham lineup, what direction do we go with the playing cards, what's in the carnival, how is the Joker's wife drawn, like all these different things, like little details that when you first read through it, you don't necessarily pick on like consciously, but they do help inform this kind of dream-like state that this book takes place in. This is all a very long-winded way of saying that. I still think this is very good as well.
Oh my god, what?
I don't think it's as good as you're saying it is, Ian, in that
Okay.
I probably do think it hasn't, through the course of time and me reading more Joker stuff, like before this and after this, I don't think it's as influential as it actually as it seems. Like I in terms of a character perspective, I definitely think it has a huge influence, but I don't think the Joker himself really changed much pre this and post this, especially compared to what was directly afterwards. I'll get into that as a bit, but I think outside of that and outside of thing, it's not something like the Dark Knight Returns where it like changed everything, or even Batman Year One where it like fundamentally changed how the stories were told. It is something that everyone's tried to imitate to almost parodic degrees now with Three Jokers. And I think as a result of that is just because Boland and Moore were top of their game at the craft, like one of the best writers you could ever get, one of the best artists you could ever get. Whatever they were going to do together was going to be gold, and the fact that they decided to do the ultimate Batman Joker story, I think was always going to be great. My issues with it do come up with, obviously, things with like how Barbara's treated and kind of how the actual meat of the story itself isn't actually much there. And I don't mean that in terms of like thematic, because this book is all just themes, basically. Like this is all just what is the Joker about, but not necessarily who Batman is, and like I don't know. It's a book where I feel like its length is perfect, but because of its length and because of I think and kind of how Alan Moore thinks of Batman, there have been books that came after this which I think have actually fleshed out and delved into their dynamics as characters a little bit more. But this I still think is a really good solid read, and definitely should be always talked about as a great comic work. I just don't think I love it as much. I don't think I love it anymore. I still really like it, and I still think it is really objectively good, but I don't have that same kind of feels that I remember having before. And I don't think that's a testament to the work. I think that's just me reading more, you know?
How about you, Steve? General thoughts on The Killing Joke?
I'm somewhere between you guys. The Killing Joke is weird because I had already read a considerable number of Batman things before I ever sat down and read The Killing Joke. Like, I didn't read The Killing Joke until I was probably in high school. So by that point, I had read, like, a bunch of Batman. Big stuff, little stuff, like, all over. So, like, I already kind of had an idea in my brain. I already kind of got exposed to its influence before I sat down with it. And, like, putting it in perspective, pre-Killing Joke, you have, like, what? 2 big Joker stories. You've got Batman 251, and you've got Detective 475. And that's probably, like, those are probably, like, the 2 big ones. And both of them kind of operate the same way. They're essentially stories where Batman is following the trail of the Joker and musing to himself about their relationship and their history, and how he's the rational one and Joker's the irrational one, and how there's like a yin yang thing going on, and it's essentially just like throwing a lot of unceremonious theming into the page of a very basic story. I think what Alan Moore and Ballin do with Killing Joke is they take the classic Joker, they take the big stories with that character up to that point from the 70s, and they turn all of the obvious things into the obvious things, except now they're poetic. And as a person that has been told is very easily turned on by poetry, I that, and I like this is no deeper than Joker's Five-Way Revenge. Like, it's really not. You read this book and you write an essay about it, and you turn the book into Five Ways Revenge. Like, it's literally just that book. But it's so poetic, and there's so many symbols, and it's so methodical, and I just kind of love that. I love the way Moore uses 9-panel grids in this, and I think there's a window to talk about like how there's definitely a general misconception about Moore's use of the grid versus what the modern use of it is. I think, like Alfie, it's not exactly the densest story in the planet, but I think what I love about it is this is the comic you give people who like really like unpacking literary motifs and themes and symbolism. Like, this is like peak high school teach you in a literature class what is literature kind of comic book. Not because it's quote unquote literature in that sense, but because if you don't know what a motif is, or you don't know what themes are by the end of reading this book in an introductory literature class in freshman year of high school, then you're just a fucking moron. Because that's all this book is. It's nothing but motifs and symbolism and theming. And I just kind of love it for that. I don't think, like Alfie said, I don't think that this is a reinvention of the Joker that's sort of created a classic conception of him. I think it is actually just kind of like a mirror of all the stuff that came before it, and we've done things that are more important and better statements about the Joker as a character since this, but I don't think we've ever distilled him down into what he was better than this.
That's my thing, is Alan Moore famously, whenever he talks about this, and it's hard to tell if he's just saying it to, like, be shitty toward DC or what, but, like, if I take him at face value, he always talks about, oh, he didn't really try with this, he didn't like it very much, he did it as a favor to Boland, yada, yada, yada. And, like, it's interesting to look at Alan Moore phone it in, I guess. But I think I think you hit on the thing, Steve, is there was a lot of stuff before this that's arguably more important in creating the narrative of the character of the Joker and Batman's relationship. There's been things after this that do a much better job of really diving in and fleshing out these characters and their dynamic together. But this sits in just a particular place for me because it does such a good job, and it is so evident that Alan Moore read Batman and Superman comics for years in this. It's so perfectly the characters. Like, it, as far as Batman and the Joker are written in this, it doesn't feel like some guy's take on Batman and the Joker. This just feels very quintessential. It feels... It's not like the Frank Miller thing, right? Where, like, you read Frank Miller Batman, and it just immediately takes you to a place, right? Like, there's not really a take here. This is just a straight Batman play. There's not necessarily much of a take on the Joker. This is just Moore doing the Joker. And he's able to give him insights the Joker maybe never quite had before, but he's giving him just a straight play. And that is the thing I admire so much about it, is it's so perfectly quintessential, and it's like removed from everything else. Because it was originally meant to not be in continuity. It was meant to just be a prestige, not even OGN, really. And then it just kind of cemented itself so perfectly, and shockingly, it fit continuity so well up to this point. It, nothing about it felt like it couldn't work with just how comics were at that point. Especially since things were getting darker and darker. It always amuses me that Alan Moore is angry at the modern comics industry for going too dark and not playing to kids and yada yada, and then just went at every opportunity he only wrote messed up shit happening to his characters that he was writing. He only wrote negative things.
He literally killed off 60s Silver Age Goofy Superman's entire sword. He killed Crypto, man.
Yeah.
Not even killed Crypto.
Yeah. So it's just, I don't know, that always amuses me. But, that's the thing of why I think it is such a perfect work. Not because it gives the Joker a voice, not because it gives Batman and Joker's dynamic anything new, but it perfectly states what that dynamic is. It perfectly captures Joker to that point. And that is the thing about it that has always impressed me and always really stuck with me, is just how well it is at just being about the characters, about the world first. And then it feels like it almost exists in a vacuum.
Yeah, I
was just gonna agree with Ian that I do think there's a strength to that kind of quintessential nature that you mentioned in terms of characterization. I don't think it's a bit of a shame that Alan Moore never wrote more Batman, because I really like his Batman voice in this. I like how he writes Batman's dialogue in this, where he's got hand wringing motions with how Bolan writes him, and he's like, I'm gonna you squirmy. He can do that kind of exaggerated, almost Miller-esque Batman going hard on a criminal thing. But then you've also got that really kind of beautiful scene at the end of the book where he's like, maybe I've been there too, maybe I can help, which is the quintessential almost Morrison Batman, who's just a nice guy. Mm-hmm. So it's I think more being able to square that, and it feels just a very pure Batman.
It's got such good lines and delivery. It's got the snappy Batmanisms, the "why aren't you laughing? Because I've heard it before. And it wasn't funny the first time." So
that's a really good line. Sorry, Steve, I didn't mean to cut you off on that, though.
Oh, no, you're good. His Batman voice is honestly pretty great, and I love it. He rates Batman a little bit in that Superman story for them, I Know Has Everything. And that Batman's also kind of goofy and funny, when he tells Jason to think clean thoughts about Wonder Woman. Greatest thing ever. But no, his Batman voice in this is really good. But I was mostly just going to agree with Ian. I think there's something that's sort of lost in the era of comics that we're in now, where everything is dominated by runs, where everyone who gets on a book, particularly a book like Batman, wants to say, if I'm going to be on this title, I need to make a statement. I need to say something about these characters. I need to say something about my relationship to them. I need to try and move the needle somewhere or some way. The bad runs are the ones where they think they've moved the needle and they haven't. The good runs are the ones where it feels like there's forward momentum at the end of it. But at the end of the day, whether it's a good one or a bad one, you kind of always end up back at square one. And so it gets kind of exhausting whenever someone has a 50-issue run on Batman that gets them somewhere, and then someone has to come in with another 50-issue run and get them to a totally different place, unrelated to the last place they were in. And so there's kind of a lost charm to just I wish people would just show up write a Batman story and just have fun with it and not try to do something like big, grand, and heavy with it. And I think, despite its reputation, I think Killing Joke is kind of that. It's not a book that's pushing Batman forward in any sort of sense. It's not pushing Joker forward in any sense. It's just it's a snapshot. It's a distillation of this. This is who these people are. This is their lives caught in a loop. It's poignant and it's interesting that the book opens and closes with the shot of the ground and the rain and the reflection of Batman coming in, and then it ends with a shot of the ground on the rain with Batman and with Batman on the shadow on the ground. Like it's a very sort of circular book, because that's just where they are. They're in this loop. This is who they are. There's nothing more to say aside from just these personalities. And I've always kind of not necessarily like said I don't think they're wrong for saying it, but I think it sort of misses the point a little bit when Grant Morrison says the end of this book is Batman snaps his neck, because I just think that, like, if you think that you read this story where from the very, very beginning Batman is saying that this is where we are, that we are caught in an infinite loop with each other and we need to break the cycle, and it ends in a situation that's no different from where it started, I just don't think you can thematically reason that Batman then decides to snap his neck at the end, because he doesn't. I think the thing about it that's so tragic and so good is that he doesn't. He just goes along with it. They're both laughing at the end because they both see the absurdity of it, and then they just keep doing it.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing for me is I've always heard that interpretation, and I'm like, I've never bought it. I've never interpreted it that the Joker is killed by Batman at the end of this.
I guess I'll be the one who. That is my reading of the book. Is I agree with Morrison, and the reason, I guess, to kind of counter like the Steve's point, right? I'm like the Steve Sava's point. The cyclical nature of the book, right? Where like how can that happen? Because that is a change. In a book which is supposed to have a beginning and end, which is like looping to show that this is an endless concept, I think that's entirely Alan Moore. That is Alan Moore going, I can end the Batman Joker story here with Batman literally snapping his neck, and it won't change a thing because they're still going to be in the next issue, because that's what these characters are. There is literally no way out. They are the people on the invisible torchlight beam. It is a imaginary tale that can never happen. Like nothing's going to stop this. Like you could blow up Gotham, and it will be back next time. And I think Alan Moore, fundamentally as a creator, has always kind of been defined by that, where. In our era is kind of defined by Morrison, right? Of like the stories as being important and powerful and being able to shape things, of these characters being older and timelessness and all that kind of stuff. Moore is the guy who's like, these characters aren't real. These characters are funny characters in silly costumes that serve a purpose, and I will write them and I will get the paycheck, and that is what will happen, and I will make a kind of commentary on it. And I think that's why I think the end of things, because I think that's the very Moore move of, I'm going to write the final Batman Joker story, and I'm going to make a joke about I could literally kill the Joker at the end, and you guys are still going to publish more Joker stories, you know? So that's, again, what I like about it is it's vague enough that there's no right answer to it. But every time I read this book and I see Batman reach in and I see that it's too late for us now, and they just start laughing, I very much see that, okay, that's it. That they've crossed the line. Is the Killing Joke here isn't that he broke Gordon. It's Batman made the mistake of thinking this was about breaking Gordon. Joker was never trying to break Gordon once in this entire book. It's all just to get to Batman. Is the thing, is Gordon is just a proxy. Joker doesn't give a fuck if Gordon breaks or anything. He wants Batman to break, and at the end Gordon's screaming to him, do it by the book. And how I think it ends is the Joker got him, is the Joker got Batman, because Batman couldn't take it anymore, and that was the Killing Joke, which was all in my reading of it.
I mean, it's like, I think that's fair, and I think like adding the more, you know, sourness to the end, to the interpretation does like help strengthen the argument. It's funny because I don't know if either of you read Boland's afterword to this, and he starts talking about it, and he gets like to the end of the second paragraph, and he goes, "Oh, and the vague ending is something that's been started to be debated a lot more heavily lately. I'll get back to that." And then he goes on and talks more about the art process and like the recolor and everything. And then he gets to the very last sentence of the last paragraph. And he goes, "Oh, and about the ending. Well, you see, the true answer is dot 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 dot."
Little bitch about because he knows.
It's funny that it is meant to be vague, and I think that's actually the strength of it. I think that's why it works. Because if you want to have that interpretation as this is the final Batman Joker story, and it's a depressing fucking interpretation that Batman loses in that dynamic, I think the true end of the Batman Joker story is something a little more like Arkham City a little bit. Like that's not like the best go-to example, but I like that tone of it a little bit more.
Right. If I was to pick, I guess I'd rephrase it as like it's the ultimate Batman and Joker story in the same way that whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow is to Superman. That's way too fucking bleak to end Superman's story on, but it's kind of is like the most like everything. There's no continuing past that point, you know. Whereas like All Star could have a sequel, or Arkham City did have a sequel, kind of thing. Yeah,
but like it just as I think if you're going to end the Batman Joker dynamic on a note, then it should be Joker dying, Batman living on, because I think that's the stronger interpretation. But more as a sour bitch, so it's whatever. But I think that's the strength of it, is you can interpret it that way. I've heard plenty of people interpret it that way. But for me, when I wasn't a Batman fan, and I just picked this up, and as I've become more and more of a Batman fan, and this book that helped me become such a big Joker fan, I had never personally interpreted that way until I'd heard someone else talk about that. I'd always interpreted it as the cycle, as the continuation. And I think that's the strength of it, is it's the characters trapped in the cycle, trapped in the narrative, and it's like it's got that door, it's got that exit option that's always there, but that doesn't mean that it's ever taken. There's so many stories where the Joker, for all intents and purposes of the story itself, the Joker is dead at the end of that. That is just the way that the book is written. But it's always, editorial always does a good job of, okay, instead of like getting shot in the face, can you just get shot and then like fall down a chasm or whatever? And like that's always the way it goes, is he always falls down or something or other. I like Bruce Timm's whole thing about whether or not a character is dead. It's like, well, if you see a character die on screen, it doesn't mean they're dead. What you have to do is you have to see a body, and the body has to have an autopsy. And even then, you have to go to the funeral. And even then, they might not really be dead. And I kind of like that about comic storytelling, because it is the cycle, it is the thing, and the idea that, oh, these characters are just stuck in this, and that that's a bad thing is always so silly to me, because I'm like, well, it worked for you, it got you into it, and you're all into passing the stories and the medium down to younger generations. So maybe someone wants to read about Batman and the Joker and not fucking Batman the 17th and the Joker squared or whatever the fuck it would be, you know? Maybe they want to read those characters. The idea of serialized characters is hardly anything new. I don't understand the disdain for the idea of the comic characters kind of always being there and always kind of stuck in that cycle.
And I think also, because on a meta level, I think you're right there. But also just like on a sort of more base textual level, so much of the story is, essentially, what kind of narrative are you giving yourself to make an excuse for who you are as a person? You know, Batman in this is in Moore's Batman in general is very much just he's trapped in a loop because he thinks he has to be Batman. Joker in this has a story of what he thought his past was that leads him to become the Joker. And it may not be the right story. There might be other versions of it. He might remember it differently. But at the end of the day, every morning he's waking up and he's telling himself who he thinks he is, and he's reinforcing it with whatever narrative he's in at the moment. And Batman and Joker in this are enablers of that. And Batman wants to believe that you can tell yourself a different story and break out of the loop. And Joker is saying you can't. And then the sort of twisted irony of the whole thing is that they're both kind of right. On a certain level, Joker wants people to tell themselves a very specific story about who they become, about the one bad day, about getting harped on one kind of narrative. And Batman...
You cut out there for a sec, Steve.
Essentially the same thing from two opposite ends of the spectrum, and when they're meeting each other to kind of argue this out and hash it out philosophically, it's absurd and it's funny because no matter what Batman tells the Joker, no matter what the Joker tells Batman, they're going to end up in the same spot. They're going to kill each other or be stuck in this loop forever until one of them dies. And it's funny because everyone in the book is doing the exact same thing, and I think the sort of more grand statement of the whole book is that this is what people do in general. It's psychology 101 to say that it's not so much that there are psychological reasons for, like, your parents fucked you up in a certain way and so you become a certain kind of child. That has a lot less merit than just if you tell yourself that there is an explanation for this, then suddenly it's a thing you can deal with. And that's just the way the Joker works, and that's the way Batman works. They're telling each other a story that they can believe, and they have to keep telling themselves that story in order to keep believing it, and that's the only way they're going to work. And I think that's just an interesting statement to make for both of them, because what are Batman stories, and what is Batman if not a person who's harped on one idea of what his tragic origin is from the very beginning? Batman's always been brooding about his parents that died when he was 8 years old. At a certain point, he could choose a different narrative, but he creates the vicious cycle of that origin for himself over and over again, and Joker does the same thing. And they're two opposing forces in that way because they come out of that loop on the opposite ends of a moral spectrum, but they're the same person. They're exactly the same kind of person. Batman's one bad day and Joker's one bad day, if they were reversed, they would reverse roles and it would still be the same thing.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing for me. I like that idea of the one bad day is also just so well done. And I think the thing that Moore does really well, like, despite whether or not this creates a voice for the Joker, all that discussion aside, the one thing Moore does really well is just this is the Joker book, because this is where he just gets to talk, man. He just goes on for days, and, like, every speech he gives is so damn perfectly twisted and nihilistic, and I love that about it. Just the average man, like that whole bit, and the one bad day speech, and just all the things he gets to go on about, like you can just escape into madness. What is it? Insanity is the emergency exit or whatever. And then he does a song and a dance, and he's importantly, throughout it all, he's funny. Like, that's the thing for me that I feel everyone misses about writing the Joker. Is the Joker is funny. And he gets it so well because just the stuff he's talking about and the way he's talking about people around him is humorous. Like, his whole speech about, like, the average man speech is funny. When you get right down to it, and the way he's presenting it, we haven't talked about this yet, and I'm sure we'll get there soon enough, but like the scene after he shoots Barbara and he's just talking about her like she's a book is funny. It's not like making you bust a gut laughing, but like just objectively that's a humorous like take. The thing it reminds me of is a scene from Schindler's List, where there's I think it's 2 or 3 SS guards, and they've just randomly decided to kill one of the people working in one of the Jews working in Schindler's factory, and it's a really cold day, and they pull him out into the snow, and they put him on his knees, and they take a gun and point it to his head and pull the trigger, and the gun jams because it's too cold. And they try another gun, and the gun jams because it's too cold. And then a third guy walks up, and he tries his gun, and the gun jams because it's too cold. And then they're just, whatever. And then they just leave. And the guy's, like, sitting there, like, you know, crying and shaking. But because of the way it's shot, it's goddamn hilarious. Like, it's intentionally Spielberg doing probably the darkest humor he'd ever done. But it's, you know, shockingly serious, literal life and death moment. And like that's to me the way you do the Joker, is you do someone who is as funny as he is scary. And that's like a line that more really hits, and it helps that you get to get so far into at least a version of his head here. Because one of the things I love about it is this Joker and the Joker who's hellbent for revenge and the Joker who just wants to throw pies in people's faces all consistently work together, because he just makes this argument that insanity is just an escape from reality for him, and doing all this twisted shit is just a way for him to cope with whatever horrific thing happened to him. And it happened so long ago, and he can't even remember. Oh, yeah, that's right. There's 3 of them. And sort of fucking
that was the takeaway from this. Is like you just mentioned, oh, yeah, he just mentioned 3 things. So that must mean they're 3 different guys.
You're right. I don't know. That's the thing that I absolutely adore about the book, is it gives you such an insight into the Joker's, like, machinations. And I appreciate that for it.
The joke thing, the fact that he's funny, I feel like we just need to underscore that point, because he's a clown. His name is the Joker. And if he's not funny, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I can't...
You're writing a seminal Batman run that people will talk about for years as if it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and your name is Scott Snyder. That's what you're doing.
I wasn't gonna name drop, but since you name drop, I'm gonna pick on Snyder for a minute. So okay, what's the joke in Endgame? Joke.
That
four was the joke in Endgame.
Yeah. That the Joker's immortal, but not really. But here's all this evidence that we gathered about the Joker being immortal, and you're just supposed to ignore that now? Was that the joke?
See, that's the thing, you know, like, it's just one of those things where, like, we've gotten to a point in society where the Batman and Joker are iconic symbols of our culture. And Joker symbolizes a lot of things. He particularly symbolizes a lot of terrible things in like, alt-right community spaces and right-wing groups and stuff. And the idea that, like, Joker is just this not bound by your rules, agent of chaos, like, hyper-serious, like, Sigma male bullshit has sort of created this perception that the Joker is, like, serious and scary and, like, too good for the rest of you. And we forget, like, the really simple point, which is just, he's not a god. He's not a symbol of anything that's coherent or anything that you can, like, turn into a message or an ideology. He's just a fucking clown, and he doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, prior to the modern era, like, fucking Laughing Fish, the most iconic story of the Joker for several decades, Laughing Fish, was about him trying to copyright the smile on fish. Like, that's that. That's all he does. Is he's just kind of nonsensical and crazy, and he's scary because he doesn't make any fucking sense, and he's laughing his ass off doing it. And so you get stories like Endgame, you get stories like Joker War, and I just don't understand what the joke is, and like what's funny about this. Why is he doing this from the perspective of him wanting to make himself laugh? I think this is why the War of Jokes and Riddles is such a good sort of modern examination of the Joker, because that story is entirely once Batman and Joker become these symbols, and once you start getting into this realm of their internal loop, the Joker can't laugh anymore because he's become too self-serious, he's become too terrifying, and at a certain point, you need to give him something to laugh about. And what's funnier than him being the thing keeping Batman off the ledge? That's what's funny. He's not trying to destroy him. He's not trying to take over the world. He's not some sort of symbol for this or that ideology. Dude's just a fucking clown, and he's looking for things that are nonsensical. And Killing Joke really, really delves into that perfectly. Like, he makes jokes, he has a song, he's funny in the darkest ways. He really sort of channels what I think Mark Hamill ended up making iconic with animated series Joker, where it's just, the dude's just got like a very slapsticky sense of humor, and he likes wordplay, and he likes puns, and I just miss that. I miss that take on the character.
Mm-hmm. But instead, you can have metal punk Joker who's maybe immortal. Huh? Yeah, look at that.
I do think all of that is really valid, and that's why I think that's what this book has not necessarily created, but like coalesced and has become like a text because of it. Is it's not necessarily how, like, if you want to talk for something of like how Joker is just written, like in terms of influence, then you want to look at something like Mad Love, right? Of like just the day to day of how the Joker appears in a comic book. That is something that just. This though is what really kind of established what like the thematic war is with Batman. What is it about? Like on that kind of larger than life scale, which Moore's good at doing, and I think Moore picked up on it, and a lot of people who hadn't read those Moore of a stories or ones where it is a little bit more subtle, because Moore literally has the Joker go on these epic fucking really beautiful speeches, well not beautiful but horrific, but beautifully written speeches, about what the point of the book is. You know, like you can't miss it. Like it is not, this is not a subtle book, which I think is to its favor, because it's not trying to, it is how Moore treats superhero characters, is they're not subtle characters. They wear their emotions on their chest as brightly colored logos. Like that is how he treats them with, and it gives it to a power to it, and an iconography, and kind of a sleekness to it, and a simpleness to it. I was going to say something about the one thing I disagree with what I don't actually think works too well on this is I don't like One Bad Day being a Joker thing. I don't think that really tracks, and I don't like how that's become like almost like a catchphrase for the Joker. Is I don't really correlate that with anything outside of this as a Joker type thing. Like that's more like a.
I've always thought it was more a Batman specific thing, and that it's just. I don't know, I have a love-hate relationship with when I see fan works and other things use it. Because I think they're more just like using it because of the iconography of this, as opposed to using it as any kind of statement on the character. Because I think you're right. I don't think it's about the Joker. The whole point is it's about Batman. And so if... Because 100% it applies to Batman, right? Like, there's no disagreement about that.
Right.
The interpretation is, okay, what if the Joker thinks or doesn't think or whatever, that he had the one bad day just like Batman, or what if he did have a one bad day just like Batman, and then that is used to parallel them. I think it works perfectly well in the context of this story as being something mostly about Batman, and the Joker's just playing on that idea.
I guess I'd be more for that interpretation, Ian, if we didn't also have like so much page space also donated to giving the Joker an origin of, so like fleshing that bad day out, and obviously that can still track with your interpretation stuff. I just feel like that's what it would have been stronger if maybe that was a little bit more parallel to almost like a parody of Bruce Wayne kind of thing. Like, I think it's in there a little bit with how ridiculous like how his wife dies is. Like, it's just like
and that, and the way she's like, oh, but you're still good in the sack. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like that.
Yeah, there's the vagueness of just the scenes itself, and then there's the line later in the speech that pretty much just solidifies that you're dealing with an unreliable narrator kind of situation.
Right, and that I don't think is ever... That's something that's just outside of Moore's intentions, that has been taken by other writers and like codified, and kind of treating this text as sacrosanct, is they don't want to overwrite and stuff, even though it itself overwrites itself. What I more so mean in that is just in the intention of like the Joker's nihilistic worldview and idea kind of coming down to that one moment. And what I mean by that is after Batman like grabs him and says maybe it was just you, and then Joker kind of has that moment of weakness kind of thing. It makes me feel like that's where the characterization kind of falls a little bit, because it feels like it is trying to portray Joker as someone who is responding to tragedy, whereas to give the guy his credit, I like get to the little bit of earlier, I actually do prefer the 0 year origin for Joker, where he's got no tragedy whatsoever. He's trying out being the Joker like early days as Red Hood, in the same way Bruce Wayne is, but it's only after they meet each other that they both figure out what Batman and the Joker is. Like, I fucking love that. I think that's genius, and I prefer that to what's prevented it. Obviously the Joker's a character, doesn't need an origin, but if I had to pick, for me, killing Joker is definitely not the
and again, I think
stuff and stuff. Yeah,
no, I think that it's not intended that way. It is like within the book, it is given multiple instances where you're not supposed to take this literally, and that this is a possible origin, just like every other possible origin we've been given with him. And it's funny that Bolan talks about like, oh man, I really gritted my teeth because I never wanted to do anything with the Joker's origin. And I'm like, well, good, you didn't. It's just the real problem here comes in with fucking Hush Returns, where it takes this 100% literally, and like it shows the Joker like looking at a photo album with him and Janine and everything.
I mean, in Free Jokers, they're still alive, Ian.
Oh, that's great. I love it.
The ending of Free Jokers is Batman fucking because we have to talk about, because this Batman fucking set it up so that those guys saying to the Joker, oh, your wife is dead, were like as a way to get her out of that abusive relationship so she could have her baby, and now they live in like fucking Canada with the Joker's fully grown son, and she's still alive, and it's like on the page, and it's the worst thing out. So that's why it's annoying. It's not this book's fault. It's everyone who read this book and then decided, yeah, okay, that's it.
That's so bad. I didn't even know that.
Dude, it's how the book ends. It's how Free Jokers ends. It's just like, here's the kid from Killing Joke is now got a son.
Oh no, that's absolutely perfect. I love it. 3 Jokers. Everything is said about this being a great Joker story. Trash compared to 3 Jokers. What a dynamic ending.
It's at least 3 times better.
Yeah, at least there's 3 times as much Joker. Oh man, that's amazing. I love it. Okay. All right. God, Jeff Johns, what the fuck? Jeff Johns has never been good at writing Batman. I don't know why he keeps doing it. All right. Anyway. Has anyone got anything else they want to talk about before we move on to the heavy shit now? Because we've done a good job of just like trying to get out all our thoughts before the heavy shit. Are we ready to get over to the Killing Joke asterisk mark?
Oh boy.
Yeah. All right. So guys, what do you think about the scene where Joker cripples Barbara Gordon and then sexually assaults her?
Wow.
I'll go first. Okay, no, that's fine. I got this. It's so weird to me that, there were 20 years after this book came out that people decided to go back to it and start really, like, having a problem with it. And it's not necessarily that, like, their criticisms are undeserved. Alfie and I have, like, kind of had a laugh at just going through every Alan Moore thing we could think of, and like there's a rape scene in all of them. The guy's got like a brand apparently, and so it's certainly like a deserved thing that maybe he shouldn't have been allowed to do it. I think Alan Moore isn't the person that should be allowed to talk about what he should and shouldn't have been allowed to do, since it was his idea. It wasn't like a mandate from the company. He came in and pitched it. And even like Len Wein's like cripple the bitch reaction doesn't really like people act like they were shocked by it. I'm like, people talk about fictional characters like that all the fucking time. I don't find that particularly, at least for me, I never found that particularly like shocking or offensive or anything as like inherently sexist. That just sounded like, kind of disdain or not giving a fuck about fictional characters that you don't give a fuck about. But I mean, maybe there should have been more care in that regard. I can't really say one way or the other. And then there was discussion about this, of like, well, it gave us Oracle. It's like, well, it wasn't intended at the time, so it doesn't count. I'm like, yeah, I guess someone kind of made lemonade out of lemons there. But ultimately, for me, I guess that scene never really bothered me, because it is treated, it's literally said that he's taking things to the limit. He's going further than he's ever gone before. It's literally showing that the Joker is trying to be as evil as he could possibly be. And so I never really interpreted it as any attempt to glorify a sexual assault. I agree that it's using sexual assault in kind of a crass way. It's kind of careless, and it's doing it to a supporting character in order to motivate a male character. Like, I comprehend that criticism. I just don't really see it as any kind of like ultimate deal breaker for this book, or as if it's like, I don't know what the word I want. I've never seen it as something that like invalidates the story in any way.
I think with a lot of issues similar to this, there's a problem with people not being able to see the forest for the trees, where, okay, we've got Killing Joke, we've got Avengers 200 with Carol Danvers, we've got, what else? I mean, I know there's a ton. There's Kyle Rayner's Girlfriend, where the term fridging originates. Like, clearly there is a trend of this happening in fiction, specifically in comic books. And I think noticing that pattern and what it does on a cultural level is important and valid as an argument about our relationship to sexual assault in fiction that's dominated by male characters and male creators. But I think that the pattern and the individual instances don't always go together. I don't think that because something fits in the pattern of this, it inherently is worthy of the same critique as the pattern itself. Because you can go through each of those examples and mine something different that they're doing right or wrong. Like, I think the Kyle Rayner story is just bad. Like, it fits in that mold, but it's also just a dumb story. It's also just, like, needlessly violent, and it's cruel and unusual in a way. It's with a character that no one's ever cared about, a character who was designed to die. Like, there are more problems in that specific instance. Killing Joke fitting that pattern and Killing Joke doing it badly, I think, are two different things. Because I don't think it does it badly. I think it just fits the pattern. And so your mileage varies there of, like, are you going to be able to stomach one more instance of this happening, even if the instance itself is not actually as bad as some of the other ones you might run across? I was trying to be diplomatic with that, but I think that's essentially it. It's like, for me, it doesn't bother me. I see why it bothers people, but I think you also just kind of have to take it case by case.
That's fair.
Yeah, and I'm in the camp with you guys where I've never read the book and be like, that's shocking. Is the most shocking thing Alan Moore ever did to my fucking sensibilities is not in any fucking Batman comic. It's in fucking Lost Girls. Jesus Christ. That's a book that people should be talking more about Alan Moore's treatment of fucking women. Jesus. But in terms of this, what I think is important to bring up though, and why I think this book, and I think we had a really strong point when you said like it kind of exists in a vacuum, and I think that's when it's best, because that's what it was intended as, because it was never intended as canon and all these things. Because it got so big and because it influenced so many things, it became more of an issue than it would be, right? Like, if this is a Elseworlds, out of continuity, like, bad future story, where, it is the same risk as something like Deceased, where Superman becomes a fucking zombie. Well, yeah, that's awful. If that actually became canon, we'd all be fucking pissed, because that sucks. But, like, obviously it's just have its own corner, so you're allowed to go a little darker with it. And I think that's what Moore's intention was. The problem becomes is, without a doubt, inarguable, this is the story Barbara Gordon is most known for her entire history as a character, is being in this. This is the biggest thing she's ever been in and probably ever will be in. And there's no mention of her being in Batgirl in it at all. She gets shot in a very, like, sudden, shocking way, and then dehumanized and used as a bait against Gordon, which I also think isn't bad, because Gordon has the same thing happen to him as bait for Batman. So I don't think it is just female character being used for male character, because it's basically the Gordon family is being used against Batman. What I do think is more of an issue is Gordon gets off a lot more fucking lighter than Barbara does, and yet he is the one of the focus, which I think that is a mistake of the narrative, and that is something to talk about. I also think the fact that the only other female character in this book might not even exist, but even if she does exist, she and her unborn child get killed as well to make a guy. Alright, that's a bit fucking Alan Moore, come on, man. You should have known when you were fucking... That's a thing. So I think that's all valid. I think those are all valid critiques that do impact the book. And to me, from my experience with him as a writer, Alan Moore just being careless and not thinking it through on that aspect. Because I think he does that with female characters quite a bit. So I think that's all valid. I do. And I think it is... The damage it has done to Barbara Gordon's character could have been avoided, because Oracle, like you said before, was such a boon for disabled rep in comics by having Batgirl be a disabled character, being able to show her being competent and still being an integral member of the Bat family elevated Barbara Gordon from being the girl one into being a character that actually meant something to a lot of people around the world, and still do, who still vehemently fight to bring back Oracle full time. However, then you can't really give that credit to this story. That's
it's entirely just after the fact, trying to find what to do with the character.
So just dealing with this and the fact that even when she's not Oracle, this still gets brought up whenever Barbara Gordon's near the Joker. So we got rid of the good thing that came from this, and now just bring up the trauma and the sexual assault and stuff, I think is a problem and is rightly critiqued. But it doesn't affect my enjoyment of this story now.
Yeah. Now, the thing for me that's always just gotten me about the conversation is Alan Moore trying to be like, yeah, they should have never let me do that. And I'm like, well, why the fuck did you do it? Like, I've never understood that. Like, it was your decision. Like, you should have the balls to stand by it. Because you know what? You fucking know Alan Moore. If he had gone to DC and asked, I want to do this with this character, and editorial had told him no, he'd bitch about that. You know? Like, there's no happy medium. It's like, oh yeah, editorial should have stopped me. Well, you wouldn't have done the book if they'd stopped you, probably. And if they did stop you, you'd bitch about the fact that you weren't allowed to do what you wanted with it. Like, I've never, like, in all the conversation about this that has come up, I don't want to, like, invalidate anyone. I used to be much more cavalier about my take on it. Like, this might be on record somewhere in the archives of Geeky Gentlemen. You know, have fun searching through 10 years of hour to 3 hour long videos of me talking about this and being like, hey, you know, Joker, bad person does bad things, shocker. And like, I realize the callousness of that kind of point. And so I have made a genuine attempt to hear out the criticism and hear out the dislike of it. And so I try not to be dismissive of the viewpoint anymore. But the thing that I don't think I'll ever not be dismissive of is the idea that Alan Moore admitting it was bad somehow confirms the criticism as 100% valid, and that it invalidates or it ruins the story in some way. That now, because even Alan Moore has come out against it, now it's truly a bad book. I'm like, Alan Moore does not need any excuse to come out against anything that DC wrote for he wrote for DC. There's in no possible world is Alan Moore looking for reasons to come out against DC. He's got a list. It's just the thing that I've never like accepted or put any amount of stock into is the fact that Alan Moore has found issue with this story. That to me has always been 100% ridiculous. But the sexual assault thing, I don't think it was, like, first of all, even needed, when you really look at it. Like, coming into his house, shooting his daughter and crippling her, probably enough. Like, even then you get like the fridging, you get the, you know, female character being used against the male character, against Gordon/Batman. Sure. But like the sexual assault on top of it does just feel like it's Alan Moore's like fucking checklist of things to do to female characters, you know. Let's play a game. Can anyone name an Alan Moore story where someone doesn't get fucking raped?
I don't think it happens in whatever happens at the Man of Tomorrow. But you could probably... I mean, he kills Lana Lang in a really fucking gross way, so...
There's also, like, mind-wiping in that book, if I remember right.
I mean, Brainiac technically rapes Lex Luthor. So, I mean, yeah, there it is. Alright, Brainiac takes over Lex Luthor's body without his consent. There we go. Every Alan Moore story has some form of rape in it.
Yeah, just like, I don't know. Like, that one's always... if anyone needs to have a Me Too movement, it's literally everything Alan Moore has ever written. Because it's just
again, no one talks about Lost Girls, which is literally about underage versions of the Snow White, and other fictional princess characters and their prepubescent sexual adventures. And like no one ever talks about Alan Moore. Why did you fucking write this?
I really fucking hate the Disney movies, and this is just my way of trying to
I really wanted to write Wendy fantasizing about being raped by Captain Hook. Wow, it's in the fucking book, man, and no one brings it up. But I mean, Joker's fucking tame, man, compared to Alan Moore. I'm just saying.
I really phoned in the Killing Joke. I would have written like a 20-page rape scene of the Joker and Penguin and all the Arkham inmates taking turns on Barbara Gordon, but I decided that I didn't want to bother with it, so I just wrote the picture scene. That's my Alan Moore. Thank you. I'm selling tickets for my impression. You can also get at me on Cameo. I don't know. Just Alan Moore's like treatment of female characters in general is always pretty piss poor. So like I don't mind necessarily this having an asterisk by it. I don't mind the deeper conversation on that. I think it's interesting that the conversation around it affected the animated film version so much so that they had to put in a whole story with Barbara Gordon into the first half to try to like make that work in some way, shape, or form, and they picked
made it worse.
Yeah, they picked like the worst person to do it in Brian Azzarello. Here's an idea, guys. Maybe talk to fucking Gail Simone, the person who like wrote objectively the best Oracle and also leveled the biggest like complaints against that move in the first place. Maybe talk to her and say, we want to do an adaptation of The Killing Joke. We're going to do that section of the movie straight. Will you write a Barbara Gordon story around this that we can make it work that way? And Gail Simone probably could have turned in like something 10,000 times better than what we got, but here we are. Oh, what a day. What a day.
It is unfortunate though that you talk about how the story has like an asterisk next to it. And I think that almost like sort of undersells what the conversation about this book has sort of become, which is I think it's important to have the conversation about what happens to Barbara in the story. But I don't think the entire conversation of the book is that conversation. Mm-hmm. And it just, for me, it genuinely gets kind of frustrating when you tweet something out or you have a conversation with someone and you just say like, yeah, I really, really liked how Brian Bolland drew the dead man's hand that Joker was playing at the start of the story. And then someone will just chime in and be like, by the way, did you know The Killing Joke's a bad comic because of the sexual assault? I'm like, I wasn't even talking about that. Mm-hmm. And no one was talking about that. But that's just how the reception for these things kind of come. Where like, you can be as nuanced and clear and concise about the problems with this book as possible, and it still doesn't feel like you're doing enough to appease people's need to talk about that one thing.
Yeah. And that's because the switch has just become at this point thing good or thing bad, not thing nuance. Yeah. And it's I don't know, man. I feel like, Steve, you joined the show in what, like 2014, 2020, something like that?
Maybe a little before, yeah.
Yeah, 2013, 2014, something like that. And I feel like we've been having that same conversation this whole time, Steve, that it's just, and somehow it's only gotten worse,
Yeah, for like 7 years, it's always just been like, there's some kind of like nuanced middle take, and like we're never allowed to have the nuanced middle take.
I know. It was funny because, like, in the group chat before this, we were like, oh no, is it going to be another week where Ian defends the thing and everyone else just shits on it? And I was like, oh, god damn it, is it really going to be that? Like, I figured we'd be, like, getting into stuff here, obviously, but I'm like, am I going to have to sit here and defend the sexual assault scene? Fuck, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that guy. Oh,
Steve,
no.
just had to throw you a bone today. You didn't need that.
Yeah.
There's already too much incriminating audio of you on the internet. Yeah, we don't need any more sound bites.
Dude, I would kill to see someone like make a supercut of all the problematic things I've said. Because, like, all you have to do is go to my movie and, like, there's scenes of me, like, dropping the N-bomb and talking, like, and being, like, very homophobic and shit. It's just because that was just where I was mentally at fucking, like, 19 to 21, whatever. And it doesn't matter. Like, I'm not gonna fucking run from it because I'm like, I offered that movie as a torrent to download for literally years. It would be impossible for me to remove it from the internet, even if I wanted to at this point. So, like, fuck it. Like, go after me, and I'll just be like, yeah, no, I said that. That was me. I'm like, are you going to defend yourself? Nah, it was a stupid fucking point. What do you want from me?
So
I'm
what
not
you're saying
running for
is your
office.
editor should have stopped you.
Yeah, my editor should have stopped me. Like that's the thing. I'm not gonna Alan Moore and like hide behind fucking DC Comics or whatever. I'm like, yeah, no, I said some stupid shit when I was younger, and I'm probably saying some stupid shit now. I'm probably saying some stupid shit the next couple weeks. Like, I'm in that middle period, right, where like I'm no longer allowed to say stupid shit because I'm young, but I'm not old enough where I could say stupid shit. You know, I'm in that middle period where I just gotta apologize. So it's fine. I got it. Alfie, yeah, man. Alfie, Steve, you guys are still in that young say your stupid shit phase. You guys don't know what you're missing out on here. Pretty soon,
Ian, I'm at your I could make a movie and drop the N-bomb and then like be fine at first stage apparently from the age range.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, you got to do it, man. You got to get that out while you still can.
I'm alright, actually. You know what? I'm good. I'm good on that. You got that. You got that covered there, bro.
All right, so
You took one for the team.
after the Doom Saga is going to be what if Goku dropped the F-bomb or N-bomb?
Oh yeah,
Dude,
no, let's do it.
You are so naive if you don't think that's already a 10-part series.
Oh no, I'm sure it is, but it'd be better if you could do it in DVDC.
I'll make it canon. Yeah.
Anyway, I only have one other big thing I wanted to mention about this story, because we already sort of talked about the coloring and we talked about the thematic and interesting stuff and all of that. I do want to mention just real quick, like, how this sort of like situates with Batman comics legacies, because this is just a thing that pisses me off.
Okay.
We've gotten to a point in Batman history where people seem to think there's only like 5 stories that exist.
Mm-hmm.
And there are Year One, Dark Knight Returns, Killing Joke, Court of Owls, and Under the Hood. Not even Death of the Family, but specifically Under the Red Hood. And it's kind of, it's interesting when you like thread Batman's needle and see like how close some of these things came out to each other. Like when you think about the fact that Year One, Killing Joke, Death in the Family, and Dark Knight Returns are all within like the same latter half of a decade. Like, that's kind of insane, notwithstanding the fact that Death in the Family is a terrible, terrible book. But I as much as I like The Killing Joke, and as much as I love Batman Year One, and as much as I like Dark Knight Returns, it gets kind of frustrating when these are, like we joked about earlier, the only books that ever kind of get brought up with any sort of significance or reverence, and that we're always kind of chasing the highs of those books, because I think people start to take them as like sort of start points instead of ending points. Mm-hmm. Like, it makes sense that after the 60s TV show and after the Silver Age that someone would write Dark Knight Returns. It does not make sense that someone would start their Batman take by invoking Dark Knight Returns. It makes sense that after Five Ways Revenge and Laughing Fish and all that stuff that you'd land on a synthesized Killing Joke. It makes less sense though when Killing Joke is just where things start, because like you said earlier, this is the Joker sort of going out of his way to prove a point, and I think we sort of lose a step in pushing Batman forward when we're taking all of these stories that are like sort of clear, defined end caps for historical moments of the character, and constantly circling back to them like they're not endpoints. It just Dark Knight Returns is a bigger offender of this than Killing Joke is, but I think they fit into the same bubble where like at a certain point you gotta realize that like your Batman in the mainline continuity who's in his like 30s is not Dark Knight Returns Batman. He can't be. It literally does not make any sense. That's not what that story is. But that's kind of where we saddled ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we did that for about 20 years, and then, you know, we got Morrison, and then the pushback from Morrison, and then the King, and then the pushback from King, and so here we are again. I don't know. It's complicated, because I think what it is you basically had a generation who grew up reading that, right? Like, Tom King, Scott Snyder, Tinian, fucking Tony Daniel. Who else wrote Batman around that?
Morrison, Paul Dini, Tomasi.
Yeah, like a lot of these... Well, Morrison didn't grow up with Dark Knight Returns, but like a lot of these guys were really young when Dark Knight Returns came out, and like that was the thing that made them Batman fans, or the thing that really like defined their fandom of Batman, and then they got on to writing the book, and then they just want to write like that, you know? That's just what they wanted to do, and that was after, 10 years of DC pushing that from editorial down until they just got people in who were doing that. And so it's interesting that the fan base has kind of moved on in some ways. I feel like there's a pushback for a more light-hearted Batman compared to the Frank Miller like vibe of the character. And there's a pushback for a more, or just a different Joker than this, but it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think my hope is just the sort of perfect historical moment we were in that let us have those kinds of books alongside a very specific mainline version of Batman. It was a good creative period. It was a good point in time where you could do all of this stuff at the same time. And I'm hoping that whatever direction Batman stuff goes in the next decade, with all of the shit that's coming out and how like DC's publishing line in November is literally half Batman, that we've kind of entered into another sweet spot here where like we can kind of spread people's wings and let them do more of what's just in their instincts, as opposed to kind of like channeling a house version of what Batman needs to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, well, since we're not really talking about the book itself anymore, is there anything else we wanted to discuss with The Killing Joke before we move on to the ratings? Nope. Okay.
I really like the line where Batman says, like, I don't even know him, Alfred. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's just such a real... That's a good... Moore's got a really good way of, like, cutting to the heart of something with very few words, despite being known for being very flowy with the dialogue. But I think that's just a really perfect summation of just how Bruce views the Joker. He's got such a relationship with him, but at the same time he doesn't know the first thing about the Joker, and that confuses him because he knows it's the only character in the entire DC universe he has that relationship. Everyone else Batman can figure out, but the Joker is just
that's
like,
what it is. That's why Batman can never deal with the Joker. He can't like build the proper psychological profile by looking at his real origin and stuff, so he can't make the contingency plans for the Joker. There it is.
And Ian just having a Eureka moment on the camera.
That's what it is. Anytime anyone's like, oh, so Batman can take down Superman 1 billion times over, but he can't take down a clown? Like, yeah, because he doesn't know who the Joker actually is, so he can't build his contingency plans.
Wow, this was productive. I'm glad I said something.
That's so good. I'm using that. All you have to do in order to beat Batman's contingency plans is make sure he knows as little about you as possible. There, boom, got it, done. Thank you. All right, everyone, let's go under ratings. I'll go first. Honestly, like, for its asterisks, for its problems, for its Alan Morris-ness, I still do think it is a absolutely fantastic story. So I will, I'll fight in the streets over it if I have to, but I will give this a 5 out of 5. Big old Joker playing cards.
I will give this a 5 out of 5 Jokerized Oompa Loompas to torture Commissioner Gordon.
For me, I'll give this a. Yeah, I think it deserves a 4 out of 5. I'll give it 4 out of 5. Brian Boland Joker panel sequences where he's on the ground, and then boom, he's turned at Batman and he's holding the gun, and that is like I don't know why, but that's the scariest Joker panel I've ever seen for some reason. Like that image always sticks with me of how he draws that sequence of just it feels like he just jumps at you so fast, and the expression on it is fucking perfect. Like that might be my favorite panel in the entire book. I don't know what it is because it's so nothing, but that fucking sequence is like the only time I've read a Joker comic where it legit feels like a jump scare. Like, it feels like a scary of just how it's being. I love it. I anyone who draws the Joker should, at least the classic Joker, should at least study some of Boland. Because my god, they cracked the fucking code. But yeah, so that's my rating.
Nice. All right. So next week, Matt sent us a couple different ideas of things we could talk about. Because it shall be the return of Matt. So he was like, all right, he wants to talk about magic and fiction, like different ways magic is presented in the universe and what ways seem to work better than others. Or maybe like the nostalgia in marketing and fiction. I don't know, as he says. My vote's for magic, and that's the one he was leaning towards. Do either of you have like a strong preference?
I think magic.
No, I'm fine with the magic one.
All right, magic it is. Magic in fiction, fictional magic.
I'm not actually weak to it. I'm just, just as susceptible as the rest of you.
And with this magic wand, I shall pull a rabbit out of my hat. Ha-ha! Alfie, you're supposed to do the thing. Thank you, Tom Taylor. That was a good tweet. Anyway, until next time, I'm the philosopher.
I am the champion of the bunny.
And I am the guy ranting about Batman Online.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.
Do 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 do.